Don't cook, otherwise I was going to ask you to cook for us.
No. I don't have to.
7 to 8 a.m. on Morning Express on KTN News and KTN Home.
Serikali inachaguliwa ifanye kazi kubadilisha maisha ya wananchi. Ndio mwananchi anaamuka mapema kwenda kufanya nini? Kupiga kura. Mwananchi aamuki asubuhi kwenda kupiga kura kwa sababu ya sura ya mtu. Ati ni mrembo. Hapana, kwani mtu akiwa mrembo anaweza kukusaidia kwa njia gani? Urembo yake inaweza kukusaidia kwa njia gani? Unaenda kupiga kura ili serikali ikufanyie kazi.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back to Morning Express, and it's time for us to look at the way it is, where we weigh in, politically speaking, and looking at what has been happening in the country and possibly the impact that it has on you and me. Now, to have that discussion this morning, I'm joined by three gentlemen, and we're expecting a fourth. But let me introduce the gentlemen that we have in studio so far. To my extreme left, we have Noah Akala, who is the Deputy Director for Campaign, and that's an ODM. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me.
We also have Irungu Kangata, who is the Member of Parliament for Kiharu. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have Ambrose Weda, who is a lawyer. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, karibu sana. Let's start first of all with, of course, a crisis that is staring to us in the face, and that is to do with the health sector, which is currently, if as it were, we can say it's in the intensive care unit, given that we don't have doctors. They've gone on strike, and that of course leaves majority of Kenyans who cannot afford private hospitals or care in a private hospital, literally at the mercy of fate. And let's start with you, Noah Akala,
Yes.
on your sentiments on that. Of course, the grievances brought about by the doctors is the CBA, which was agreed upon in July 2013.
Yes.
We're now in 2016, heading to 2017, and that has not been honored.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm a medical doctor by profession, and I remember participating in those strikes in 2012 and 2013 before we finally agreed upon a CBA with the national government and the Ministry of Health at that time, and the Treasury as well. It's unfortunate that the CBA has not been honored to date, because governments are measured on their credibility upon their ability to honor promises. But I think the problem goes beyond that. You know, the Constitution of Kenya, 2010, in Schedule 4, stipulated that health was to be devolved over a period of 3 years, a staggered process that would allow county governments to build capacity to be able to manage the sector. Unfortunately, immediately the new government took power, health was devolved within a span of 6 months, and the whole responsibility of managing healthcare was cast upon the infant county governments. 3 years later, 4 years later actually, now we're seeing them struggling with capacity to manage doctors, healthcare practitioners, nurses, pharmacists. So it comes as no surprise that this is the result of poor planning and policy administration for the past 4 years. That's my view on the matter.
All right, Irungu Kangata, do you agree that it's purely poor planning on the part of the government and not implementing policy? I mean, this is a promise that was made, so really, why should they not honor the promise?
First and foremost, I'm surprised by my colleague who represents ODM here, because I think ODM portrays itself as the champion of devolution, meaning they would have wanted those services to be devolved as soon as possible, which is what the government did in any event. So long as the Constitution was very clear that this item ought to be devolved, the government had nothing else to do apart probably to hasten that process. Be that as it may, on one hand, I belong to the school of thought that we need to pay our doctors well, we need to pay our nurses well, taking into account that health is one of the most important indicators of the well-being of any society. Presently, Castro is being remembered for giving Cubans a very good health care, so we need to replicate that. So I believe that if there is a sector, personally I would champion for better payment, is health. One, to forestall them to exit from this country, by brain drain. Number two, to ensure we also lure so many people to join that profession. Maybe the only probably issue I would comment on the other side is that there's a way you can pay your workers, and then that then causes what we call unemployment, because you do not have so much resources. So if you put all your resources towards paying your employees, then your capability to recruit new employees may be compromised. It is what we call the corseted insiders. Those people who are inside, they are living large. Those who are outside, they are gnashing their teeth. So I say that because, like now, there are so many medical interns who are graduating from the various universities that we have, who are finding a problem towards posting. It has always been an automatic that when you leave from the university, you're automatically posted. Now, because of this agitation, there is every likelihood the government will say, no, it will no longer be automatic for you to be posted. So as you agitate for higher salaries, also take into account the ask the people we are graduating who needs also to be absorbed, particularly taking into account that Kenya is a country that has very few doctors and nurses vis-a-vis the ratio of the population. And if you pay so much, those who are inside, those who are outside will no longer get a guarantee to get it.
Okay, but the issue the doctors are raising, before I come to Ambrose and maybe look at it from a legal perspective, the issue that the doctors are raising is the fact that there was an agreement. There was a collective bargain agreement which the government and the doctors came into, they had some form of agreement which has not been honored.
Me personally, I would not look from that point of view. I would look from the point of view, from an economic point of view. It is said that if you want to create employment in a society, you have to have what we call a flexible job market, And some of these ideas which are brought in by unions, they make a market inflexible, meaning those who are outside, those who are unemployed, it becomes very difficult for them to get employed because the market is very unflexible. So to me, I belong to the school of thought, make the market flexible so that the issues regarding, let's say, like salary is an issue that you negotiate as an individual with the employer, as opposed to collective negotiations, which may push up the price of labor to the exclusion to those people who want to be employed. I know of so many clinical officers presently who are struggling, who are outside there. I know of so many nurses who are yet to be absorbed, whereas Kenya needs to employ so many into our health system. And some of these ideas which are brought about by some people may make our labor market very unsuitable to new entrants to the labor market. However, I do support better remuneration for health workers. That principle.
That stands. No, you wanted to respond to
yes, that? I find some of the assertions made by Mheshimiwa here are very disturbing. One, he's encouraging the reneging on the agreement by the Jubilee administration on paying these doctors. And furthermore, when we hear scandals of 6 billion shillings lost in Afya House, we heard the other day about 38 billion shillings being spent on medical equipment by the national government on behalf of the county. They procured this equipment from the US without following laid out procurement laws, and many, many other scandals that are bedeviling our country at the moment, including the NYS and Eurobond. There is money. There is money to pay our doctors. If there's money to pay our legislators, and you compare the value of the work done between the two, then the doctors and healthcare practitioners, nurses, clinical officers are doing work that is of much more value to our society and measurable. When was the last audit done on the performance of members of parliament? You'd see in yesterday's paper, there was a query raised about 273 members of parliament over mismanaging upwards of 4 billion shillings. When was the last audit done on the performance of these members of parliament? How do you measure the work that they do over their 5 years? While for healthcare practitioners, their outputs are evident. Lives saved, children delivered.
Can I reply to that?
I want to bring in
Yes.
Weda before
Can I reply?
You respond to that. Let me hear from Weda from a legal perspective. The fact that there was a CBA agreed between doctors and the government, and right now we have the CS for Health, Cleopa Mailu, saying that the doctors are somewhat jumping the gun. Since 2013, really?
Now, I think let's get our facts right. one of the fundamental mistakes we did in the 2010 Constitution was to devolve the health services, taking into account the skewed nature of the provision of health services. They are mainly in towns. So when you go to West Pokot, there are no doctors there are no nurses, leave alone big hospitals. And then the fact that we also cannot control people. If you send my medical money to Kisumu and I live here, and I spend here.
The issue, I guess, may not have been the fact that it was devolved, but other than the fact that we have...
I'm coming to it, actually. That's where the problem is.
Okay.
That devolution did not take into account the cost. Then, when we did elections, I'm surprised Dr. Akala comes with other things. The issue was that the government is not supporting devolution, and they're dragging their feet on giving the counties their responsibilities. And one of them was the health services. So it was done, and done hurriedly. At that point, the CBA had been negotiated, but negotiated before the counties took root. But eventually, they were the ones to implement it, because the doctors and everybody had been sent over to them. And this is where the disconnect is. The CBA was negotiated with the central government, supposed to be implemented by the county government. I have heard the minister saying that, therefore, there should be the input of the county governments into the CBA that was negotiated before it is implemented. And that is where the stalemate is. Is it supposed to be what they negotiate with the central government for the counties to implement, or the counties should have their input? And that is where they should come on a round table to deal with it, so that they say, this is what we are capable of paying, this is what we are going to pay. Otherwise, the county government will be saying, central government gave us a prescription early enough before we had our own input. That is where the problem is. But overall, as a country, we have to relook at the devolution of the health services. I can tell you for sure that you will not find a consultant cardiologist in West Pokot, and they are not going there. You will not find another one in Mandera. They are not going there. This is an area, just like education, where we thought this must remain central. We need to relook at it. So, Dr. Akala, as you do the ODM Madogodani about corruption, sometimes these are the areas where we say, here we didn't do right, let's go back. And it will take us many years to have enough doctors to go around the counties.
Okay, Michael, I think there's a bit of lack of sincerity on the part of my two colleagues here. When they talk about the spirit of supporting devolution comes by following the law as it's laid out in our laws of Kenya and in the Constitution 2010. I put it forward here earlier that Schedule 4 of the Constitution prescribed that healthcare would be devolved over 3 years. And there was a reason for which the framers put this forward in that fashion. The Transitional Authority also made this recommendation to the national government, and it was ignored. And over and above that, we just need to study the patterns in which the budget has been prepared over the past 4 years to understand whether there's really a spirit of supporting devolution in Kenya. The Ministry of Health continues to get budgets. Initially, it got a budget of 35 billion shillings, and the ministry is supposed to be restricted to policy making, while the counties manage the real bread and butter, the real meat of administration of healthcare. And it got 35 billion shillings, while counties are struggling with budgets of like 6.1 billion in Mombasa, and more than half of that goes to salaries for personnel inherited from the national government. How are counties meant to afford to manage healthcare if the funds are not following the functions? Over and above that, in the last financial year, upwards of 80 billion shillings was allocated to the Ministry of Health. Why isn't this money going to the counties to enable them to pay their doctors, their nurses, the clinical officers, and over and above that, to be able to implement the free maternity care that the president himself committed himself to in the first Madaraka Day of Kenya? You remember he made that announcement in Nyayo Stadium that parents would, new mothers, would not have to pay a single shilling, that for a cesarean section, the national government would put forward 5,000 shillings, and for normal delivery, 2,000 shillings. That money does not even make it to the counties. So funds have to follow functions if the health system is going to function. You can't just put it on paper and say that we've devolved and do nothing to support devolution. That's what we mean when we say that the Jubilee administration is not doing everything that it can to support the spirit of devolution in this country.
All right. Okay.
I find it very interesting. At the beginning, there was so much noise that the government should devolve everything.
Funds.
That is one.
Funds.
Two, the funds are allocated by Parliament, the MPs, including CORD MPs.
The leader of
It is not the Jubilee administration that allocates that these funds are here, these funds should go there. If we are honest up to some stage, then we'll be able to resolve this critical issue of health. About health, let's not politicize many things. Number three, the medical needs of outlying counties. Doctors themselves do not want to go there. Why? Because most of these counties have issues paying salaries. Some delay as much as 3 months due to pure mismanagement. So doctors who have options decide, I'm not going there and I'm leaving your job. It has nothing to do with the budget. It's just that the disorganization in the counties, including the counties where you come from, Sumu and wherever, and all those ones. So the doctors are saying, I have options, I'm a specialist, I'm not going there. So let us look at the core. It's not about Jubilee or who, the core.
Right. Before we move on to something else, Irungu Kangata, you're a member of parliament, and possibly you could give us answers as to why some of this money has not been reaching the counties, because that seems to be the main issue here.
Well, first and foremost, we need not to mix issues. We are talking of a strike. We are not talking about the national government failing to remit any money to the counties. I wish that was the agitation, but that is not the agitation. The agitation is about increasing
the
money.
Salaries.
Yes. Number two, there is the aspect that you have mentioned of corruption amongst members of parliament. Fine, I agree. No one supports corruption, whether by members of parliament or by governors. I wish that was the agitation, but it is not the agitation. Again, there is the issue as to whether members of parliament should have high salaries. I agree, it's wrong. But then again, two wrongs don't make it right. Here we are talking about the current agitation about them striking. And again, you did ask a legal question. Again, I think we should not resort to legalism. Because, of course, one may as well argue, according to our constitution, there are some sectors where strikes are not allowable. So if you go that way, one can as well raise that issue. So, and again, also there's the issue as to who is to blame. Is it the national government or is it the counties? The national government no longer handles matters of health except policy issues. The people who, by the way, who are going to be affected by these salaries, if at all they are going to be increased, are the counties. In fact, if you know, it is the Council of Governors who went to court and obtained a court order against the strike. It is not the national government. So, to me, going forward, I would say number one, I agree. Doctors and nurses are not being treated well in our counties. That one I concede. They are not being treated well. I know of a county where their statutory deductions have not been sent. I know of people who are yet to receive their salaries. So, starting from that point of view, I think counties should do, number one, ring fence money that is meant for people in the health sectors. If at all they cannot do it at that level, I would urge the Senate to come up with a law that is going to ring fence money that is meant for health. To me, that would be number one. Number two, I agree that doctors and nurses needs to be paid better. That one I agree. But I would also urge us not to ignore the plight of so many clinical officers who are yet to be employed, so many medical interns who are facing the problem of being sent to various government hospital postings, and so many other nurses who are yet also to join employment.
All right.
So to me, that should always tax our mind.
Okay. Noah Kala, way forward. Government in waiting, CORD, of course, would have solutions. What do you think is a solution for our health sector?
It begins with a simple support for the spirit of devolution. Let the funds follow the functions. Under CORD administration, you would not see the national government procuring cancer machines on behalf of counties, incurring expenditure on behalf of counties without their input. In so doing, it undermines the county's ability to plan for delivering services at the local level. You would not see a Accord government lose money, 6 billion shillings, through corrupt dealings at the National Ministry of Health, procuring containers under the guise of calling them mobile clinics. Under the Accord government, you would see all funds meant to support health at the local level devolved to counties. Counties would then be empowered to recruit the clinical officers and medical interns that he's referring to. They would then be empowered to plan strategically on how to deploy resources across the county, as he's referring to the outlier counties such as West Pokot, Mandera, Garissa. They would be able to offer attractive packages, not necessarily financially, but other incentives can be offered, such as postgraduate education, and then people are bonded.
Allow me to stop you now and ask the question where Kenyans now would ask, how much confidence do we have in CORD? And this is because the same things you're saying, Jubilee would probably say the same thing, that they would be able to do that. What is it that assures Kenyans that CORD can actually deliver, given that even those who have been found corrupt within CORD has been quite silent compared to...
Let me give you the simple basis on which Kenyans can rely on this assertion, is that Jubilee has had the opportunity for the past 4 years and done nothing. During the tenure of the Grand Coalition government was when the first doctor's strike that was resolved through a CBA was arrived at. That first phase of the CBA was implemented. And remember that the Ministry of Health was being managed under an ODM appointee. At the time, his former Member of Parliament, Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o. That was implemented. So we have a track record of doing what we say. Jubilee, on the other hand, have had 4 years. They have had all the opportunity to support devolution, to stamp out corruption, to ensure healthcare flourishes and works properly in the country, and they have not done so. So what we offer, as opposed to what they offer more promises. We offer a proven track record of delivery.
Okay. Whether?
Is it talk about CORD or ODM? You know, you people, you flip-flop, left, right, and center. The issue still is about the structure of provision of medical services. It is good that they be given salaries, good salaries. But the question of even standard, if you're a doctor, and you're being asked to earn the same salary and you're going to Tana River. Okay? Under the current structure, you're supposed to actually apply for a job in Tana River and get it. Doctors are not going there. Believe you me. They want jobs in Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, Eldoret, Nanyuki, Malindi. That cannot be resolved by the devolution theatrics. That's why we are saying, I am saying my personal opinion, we need to relook at this. That is how we took security, education, health. Those three things, you deal with them in that way that we are dealing currently, there is a problem. Why? Because the governors are still having the trauma of management. They are still busy eating, stealing, the majority of ODM court governors. They are eating so much that they have forgotten about doctors. So let us look at it collectively so that we negotiate so that we can have all these medical doctors and personnel in all the outlying counties without apportioning blame. But if we are apportioning blame, yet it is a constitutional issue, it will not resolve issues in Tana River, in West Pokot, in Turkana, in Galole, all these places. All the doctors are here in Nairobi. Right. Even in Kisumu, finding the various specialists, they're not there. You go to Kisumu, they tell you now go back to Nairobi. So imagine, and Kisumu is a city. Now take it to Garissa.
Well, unfortunately, with the leaders we have, I mean, we had Governor Ruto the other day,
yes,
who was injured in an incident and he had to go all the way to South Africa. If that does not tell us something about our health sector and the fact that we need to do something about it, then I don't know.
In fact, it is not telling us. It just tells us that the same governor that does not have structures and he does not believe in the very doctors.
In his own doctors.
Because if the same Kenyan doctors in Kenyatta could separate two conjoined twins and they are alive, and he had just some dislocated jaw somewhere, a small jaw where he couldn't trust our doctors. the kind of treatment where you go abroad, you stay there, and when you come back, you walk straight into a rally.
Well, we don't seem to be getting solutions, because I remember even
Yes,
at the
maybe-
time of Anyang'
maybe can
Nyong'o,
I-
as he was Minister for Health, he
Yes.
still had to go abroad for treatment.
Medical.
And that at that time,
Well,
I mean, how many Kenyans can afford that? And it's unfortunate.
Some solution would include, number one, it is true. We reconsider whether it makes sense for us to devolve health. To me, I agree, it needs to be retained at the national level. That's number one. Number two, we increase capitation to the health sector. We have what we call the Abuja Declaration, which had countries had pledged they are going to keep 15% of the revenue towards health. To me, that's a very good idea. We need to send more funds to that sector. It's currently somehow underfunded. Number three, we need to put more resources to what we call primary health care, because most patients are seen by CEOs. They are seen there in the rural villages as opposed to coming here in Nairobi. That also makes a lot of sense. But also finally, and quite importantly, we do have quite a big number of people graduating from the various health institutions, MTCs, universities, who are here to join that profession.
All right. And I want to bring in something else now. This is to do with a report that came out. And of course, right here on KTN News, we have what we're calling 47 days of accountability, where we're going from county to county, looking at the Auditor General's report and what really that means to Kenyans at the end of the day. We also had the Auditor General question members of Parliament. And allow me to just break it down for you. And I think at the point where we lose it as Kenyans is when we make it a Jubilee and CORD affair. Corruption is illegal, period. And looking at some of the statistics, this list that I'm going to give you right now, I'll say is not exhaustive, because obviously out of the statistics we have, 273 out of 290 members of Parliament could not account for the funds that were given. I'll just give you a few. Let's start with Aidan Canaan, who is the Member of Parliament for Elders constituency, who was given 5 million Kenyan shillings, or rather 5 million was given aside, set aside for road which was to be done, 1.5 kilometers road construction. On visiting the site, only 1 kilometer had been complete, and according to the Auditor General, he says that it was done very, very shoddily. So what happened to the 5 million? Your guess is as good as mine. Let's also look at 3 million shillings that was given towards buying of motorcycles, and motorcycle parts ended up being bought. Now, according to the Auditor General, again, given that this 3 million shillings was given specifically for buying of motorcycles, parts were bought. These parts, as per the time this was going to be reported, are still in a store. So why spend 3 million shillings to buy motorcycles and then end up buying parts, which is an obvious and outright flaunting of the law, procurement law. Let's move on to another member of Parliament. And we have, I think we have a slight difference there. The picture is not Ndungu Githinji, unfortunately. But anyway, Ndungu Githinji, who is the member of Parliament for Teto, he chairs the Budget Approval Committee. Okay, I think this is completely mixed up. But actually, the chair for the Budget Approval Committee is Mutava Musimi. All right, let's move on to David Were, who is in the constituency of Matungu. He's the chair of the National Assembly and Labour Social Welfare. So the reason why we've also put this here is that these are not just members of Parliament, but they're also responsible for other committees. 796,449 paid to a pharmacist. Get this. For grading a road. So I'm not quite sure how a pharmacist becomes one who grades a road. But the problem is not just there. If a pharmacist can grade a road and do it properly, fine, let them do it. But the truth of the matter is, after the Auditor General went to this particular road, it was found that actually nothing had been done. So what happened to 796,949 shillings? Again, your guess is as good as mine. Let's move on to another member of Parliament. I'm just giving you a few so that we'll have this discussion and see that corruption really is not about Jubilee or CORD, but it affects you and me. And until we get to a point where, as Kenyans, we realize that it cannot be politicized, we need to put our foot down and agree that as Kenyans, we will not allow corruption to continue. Mary Emase, who is Teso South, Member of Parliament, she's the Vice Chair for Budget and Appropriation. She sits under Mutava Musimi. Now, 1.2 million shillings given to training of 80 people, get this, for driving. Why would this be done? According to the Auditor General, it was recorded as, what was the term that he was using? It was inappropriate. Why? Because within that budget, there is not an allowance given for driving school. But anyway, looking at details of this, then we find that there was actually no system to say or to grade or check how did they arrive at the 80 people. Meaning those 80 people could end up being relatives, cousins, or anybody picked up from the street. So, again, your guess is as good as mine. Let's move on to another member of parliament. Okay, that was the last member of parliament, but you also had Mutava Musyimi. Let me just give you Mutava Musyimi's because he's from Bere constituency. He is the chair of the budget approval committee. So not only is he a member of parliament, but he is the man, literally, who approves the budgets right there. 1.56 million shillings was set aside for training of teachers at Kenyatta University. And the Attorney General, or rather the Auditor General, themed this as irregular because it was contrary to the CDF laws. Again, under Mutava Musyimi, we have 7.1 million shillings, which was given apparently to bursaries, towards bursaries, but the Auditor General visiting the county office or the office that is supposed to give accounts on that, there was no supporting documents for which students benefited or schools that these funds went to, which ultimately means that the Auditor General cannot follow up and find out who benefited with this 7.1 million shillings and which school. So let me come back to the panel now. And this is where, gentlemen, I think we're getting it wrong because we seem to be politicizing corruption. But when we look at this, it seems it's not just the county government, but even members of parliament. Let me start with you, Irungu Kangata, because these are your colleagues.
First and foremost, I would want this discussion to have involved a person who has done accounting. Neither of us here is an accountant.
Yet you are the accounting officers. The CDF is literally on your doorstep.
Personally, I have done some what we call elementary accounting. I've done CPS up to section 2.
So is that what has given you an advantage over the other members of parliament?
No. The point I'm trying to...
We also did it in law school and passed.
No, the point I'm trying to bring out is that you need to understand what is an audit report and how to interpret it. Let me give you one good example that you have alluded here, which is very unfair to that member of parliament. That lady, Mary, there's nothing wrong that she did. The auditors have been coming to our constituencies and telling us, hey, why are you funding Boda Boda training? And this money is meant for secondary school, bursary, or even universities. They've been arguing Boda Boda training is not covered under bursary. But when you look at the regulations governing bursaries, there's nowhere we have been told not to fund driving schools. So meaning, taking into account the young people, so many were in that sector who don't have driving licenses and who are causing so much agony to our people through accidents and insurance refusing to pay. Members of parliament, majority of them have entered into that realm of supporting such endeavors. So you find an auditor veering off into what we call policy issues, but which ought to be left to the CDF committee. That's number one. And to me, your report also failed to do another thing. You ought to have looked at what we call the responses from the CDF committee, because once an audit question is raised, there's always a reply, and most likely that reply could have captured what I've told you. Number three, when you look at that law which was prevailing that time of CDF, members of parliament were ex-officios members. So to connect a member of parliament with strict mismanagement of CDF from a legal point of view would be unfair because they are purely ex-officio members. We are not like a governors. Our governors under the constitution, they are the CEO. They have the personal responsibility on the management of the county government. But for us, particularly taking into account that law, it is clearly indicated we are ex-officios. The only thing we may have is political...
Okay, Ambrose, whether begs to differ, I can see from the way he's shaking his head.
What is on the ground is that the MPs control the CDF.
No, we're looking at the law.
Please.
This is the law.
They control the CDF.
What about the law?
Second, in statutory interpretation, we have what is called the intention of Parliament when they were legislating. Cavalier interpretation, where you say, where does it say training of border is not education. That's now that's a mischievous way of interpreting this law to escape or aid forms of corruption and abuse of public resources. The fact is this: the MPs have been randy when it comes to CDF. We thank God that the Auditor General has caught up with them and the reality is coming. The best thing is for you to repent and ask for forgiveness and say, here we were wrong, we were giving... If you have a border, and then you have somebody going to Form 1, he doesn't have fees, he has gotten 395. He's supposed to go to Alliance Girls. He doesn't have money, she doesn't have money. And then you have to choose between training a border at 3,000 shillings and 50-something. Then you say it is the same education. That's a very mischievous way of interpreting a very serious law. Theft, as it is, has been done, and it continues to be done, both by Jubilee MPs and by CORD MPs. The fight against corruption is a national concern, all of us. And to the extent that even the president himself said, gentlemen, what can I do? Okay. Now, when you hear his lieutenant like Irungu Kangata also saying that the law allows this, that's
I want to hear from Noah. Let me hear from Noah, then I'll come to Irungu.
Let me intervene between the squabbling Jubilee supporters. I want to take a broader view on this issue in a twofold manner. The first way is that I want to commend the Office of the Auditor General, Edward Owoko, because it seems to be one of the last bastions of hope for Kenyans in terms of maintaining transparency and credibility in public affairs. And this is why, when the Jubilee administration was putting forward an amendment bill to make changes to the manner in which the Office of the Auditor General functions, we as the opposition were strongly opposed to it, because that office would not be able to deliver information of vital importance to Kenyans such as this if that bill were to pass. And the second perspective I want to take on this issue is one that's been espoused by our coalition leader, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, on multiple occasions, that legislators ought to restrict themselves to legislating and let the executive execute. Members of parliament, the structures around a member of parliament are not enabled, are not capacitated to build roads, to evaluate tenders, to buy drugs for hospitals, or even to evaluate who deserves a bursary and who doesn't. That ought to be left to trained professionals under various executive authorities, be it national or county, which is why we strongly associate ourselves with the ruling of the Supreme Court that deemed the CDF Act unconstitutional, and we stand by that ruling.
All right. Irungu Kangata, do you agree that currently, looking at even the pilferage that's happening with the CDF, the Supreme Court had a point?
It was a constitutional court.
Constitutional court, sorry.
Yes.
First and foremost, strictly speaking, and I want to again reiterate, it depends on how you read that report. Like that lady can tell you, putting her picture there was very unfair.
No, the issue with that lady, let me explain. Let me explain. Let me explain it because you brought it up twice. The issue was not the bursary per se. The issue is the fact that there was no way of telling how did she come up with the names, the 80 names. You could pick from anywhere. Shouldn't there be rules and regulations that govern or show that if I'm giving bursary, this is how we have settled on James whoever?
There is something we call a bursary policy. And I wish probably you inquire from that member of parliament whether that constituency had a bursary policy. That policy is the one which sets out the methodology of how they identify names of beneficiaries. And according
to the Auditor General, that policy was not present.
Exactly. You see, the point I'm trying to argue, before you publish that story, inquire from member of parliament what was your reply to this query. Because some of those issues, there were responses from the member of parliament.
But that's reinventing the wheel, because the Auditor General has done that. He has queried and has waited for this. These are reports, not of yesterday or the day before. They were done in 2013.
Thank
So
you.
they have had an opportunity to respond to it.
You see what happened? When you pull out a report of 2013, you ought to have followed up whether that matter went to PAC and what was the discussion in PAC. Because in PAC, that is where those people get an opportunity to bring, for instance, a policy document to reply to the issues raised. Anyway, be that as it may, I wish the contention of the auditor report was that this money was allocated for this purpose and there were no people who were trained. But if at all there is evidence people who have been trained, no money has been lost. The argument, according to Auditor General, is, should CDF support boda trainings? To me, yes. These are human beings. They are young people who are unable to go to secondary school, who are unable to go to college, who ought to be empowered. By the way, they are doing a very important thing. Otherwise, if they are not riding bodas, they will be mongeki. Higher, that's number one. Number one. To reply to your next question. Number two, no.
Should
Allow me, yes, to reply to your issue.
Should MPs be the one to administer funds?
Strictly speaking, when you look at the law, we don't administer fund. But in common parlance, there's that notion we do. And incidentally, I support it. I want to illustrate why members of parliament do so. You see, the reason why members of parliament do so is because of our political culture. People still have this notion they want to see their leader do something deliverable. And that explains why senators are having it rough, because they cannot give something that is deliverable, which is by is a good thing, because we Kenyans are poor. We had to reach a stage where the way we view leaders is from the point of view of what we call the oversight role. So, to the extent, Kenyans still want to see a member of parliament build a certain road, build water, and they are going to use that to evaluate whether they are going to re-elect him back or not, then it makes all the sense we empower members of parliament to continue to that role. But if we reach a stage where that political culture is going to change, the better for me. But it's still so strong, it abstains up to today. And by the way, in other places, it is not only Kenya where we have such kind of a system. CDF in other jurisdictions, including places like in Asia, in Latin America,
I think the issue
is still a tool.
is not the system.
I think, let me tell you, this thing of training border, they are just training their voters. There's no value they want to give to their own people. They are not looking at it long term, 20 years, 30 years. The same way when they sit down to increase their salaries.
No, are you saying
beyond Sarah's recommendations? They say we are now MPs. Again, when it comes to looting CDF together, you can see you are defending that lady very vehemently over audit queries. The way audit works is this. The auditor comes and says, give me your books as you have done them. Give me. And then Irungu Kangata and his team, they give and say, now look at them. At that time, it's hopeful they have given everything. But then because the Auditor General has a keener eyes, is able to ask questions, how did this work? How did this work? How did this work? Ordinarily, the next phase, you should give the answers. But that is where the MPs, they go under the table. They disappear, hoping it will end. Now, it does not end there. That is when now Auditor General says, this was not explained, this contravened the law, this contravened the law. And when it has been told off, or we are now being told, then the MPs are up telling us, oh, we are trying to train border, they are also voters, they are also this and that. That money is not meant for you to train your potential voters. It is meant to give value to the young people of Kenya if you choose the bursary path. If you choose to do a road, which you have no capacity to do, it is a road. It is not your kinsman in the pharmacy spreading medicine along the road saying we are doing. The abuse is there and you must admit it.
Yes, let me just disagree with also the last point that he has raised about Mheshimiwa here, about the culture regarding who voters elect. While many people feel that unless someone goes and gives voters that tangible thing that he's talking about, which ordinarily means money, yeah, which is just voter bribery in different perspective, that they will not get elected. I don't ascribe to this school of thought, because history in Kenya has shown us that there are various legislators who have time and again managed to be elected against a wave of wealthy opponents And also, that said, there are wealthy contestants who have vied for various positions and have failed despite their wealth. So measure that against the audit of the performance of MPs that we often see year to year, where we are told that such and such a legislator has not said a single word in Parliament the entire year, or has not said anything.
You hear him?
Or has not said
he's
anything
putting premium in talking in Parliament.
That is
because
the
Raila
oversight.
Odinga.
Wait. Irungu, allow him to
You see,
finish. You'll have a chance
that
to
is the
respond.
oversight role through which legislators can be assessed in terms of their performance. So these legislators who have no business, they don't attend parliamentary sittings, they don't attend the committee sittings where, in fact, we have just come to learn that many legislators just go sign and then leave committee sittings so that they can collect the allowances meant for those sittings. However, they don't participate.
But no, Akala, do you agree that this is a problem that we have both in Jubilee and CORD? And as long as we politicize it and make it look like it's a Jubilee or a CORD thing, we cannot win because we blur the facts. We blur the issue that is before us, and it's corrupt people.
Let me tell
corruption is illegal, full stop.
I agree with you that corruption is a crime, it's illegal, it's a
So do you agree that we have
a
a problem both in Jubilee and CORD?
I agree that corruption has no party lenses. It does not see CORD, it does not see Jubilee. However, that is not the issue. The issue is, what does the top leadership of either side of the political divide say and do about corruption? We are in the opposition. We have taken a position regarding the CDF Act. We have said that it is unconstitutional that the CDF Act continues to be put in place. We have put forward our opposition to that. So that is the official position of our coalition. What has Jubilee said? Nothing.
Can I reply? Yes. Well, you have seen the difference between the philosophy underpinning CORD and the one underpinning our party. To CORD, they put a lot of premium on how a member of parliament shouts in parliament, how much good English he talks in parliament.
He said bringing up bills to
well, fine, I
talking
agree.
and shouting.
Yes, whatever,
fine.
Fine, contribution in National Assembly. That is where they put their premium. But to us, we don't look things from that point of view. We want to see a leader who does something tangible to the people, who brings water to the people, who builds footbridges, a person who gives...
Regardless of how he does it?
Well, no.
Yeah,
I say that because his leader has a poor record of development in Kibera. And when the new member of parliament, Okol, came with CDF and built a very good day school there, they refused to even attend there to open up that school because there is no record of proper management of CDF in Kibera, and that does not move them.
You see
the kind of luminaries in CORD region. Show what Raila Odinga did
I am personally aware of the details of that project. He should ask himself, what was the name?
Anything tangible. To them, they want members of parliament like Buddy, who are so strong, vocal in National Assembly.
Mike,
but in terms of development to the people,
let me hear from Weda.
Please, let me last
Okay, gentlemen,
Please,
it's very important.
Please, let me just explain this.
Directly challenged
let me explain
the
this
ODM
first.
side.
Just allow me to explain this.
Show us what
Okay,
Raila
gentlemen, let's have some order.
Just allow me to explain this.
Let me allow Noah to respond to what Irungu
Show
has
us in
said.
Kibera.
But very briefly, because I want Weda to come in.
Mheshimiwa Irungu Kang'ata is an expert in diversion from the issues. The issue that was being put forward to him today was whether the current members of parliament are managing their CDF as they ought to as per the prescription of the law. Raila Odinga is not a member of parliament. He is not a member of parliament, and this audit report has not raised any issue regarding the performance of Raila Odinga as a member of parliament for Kibra because it was not for that period of time. He should spend his energy and time explaining what he has done with his CDF. That's number one. Number two, I have personal details regarding that project that he is referring to. The first question he should ask himself is that what is the name of that school and what was the origin of that school? That school is called the Raila Odinga Educational Center, and he is the one who initiated it, funded it, sending over 2,000 children to university using his own private funds before the advent of the CDF Act.
All right.
So how can he pretend to know more about the people
Well,
of
did you
Kibra
go
and
to
why
open it?
they were electing
Okay,
him?
the question I think that was being
member of
raised was to
parliament
do
for
with the track
Murang'a,
record in
the
terms
member
of
of parliament for
Raila
Murang'a,
Odinga being the member of
the
parliament for
member of
Lang'ata
parliament
and
for Murang'a cannot purport to know more about the welfare of Kibra residents who elected Raila Odinga and broken straight for 28 years more than
but
the
he can
people
have
himself.
information. He is a Kenyan
More
who
than the
can
people
have information
himself.
regarding that. Let me hear from you.
I think one thing I want Mheshimiwa Kenyatta to clear is that he should know that the role of an MP in the National Assembly is first and foremost to legislate, not to give things. Hon Sakaja Johnson stands ahead of you people because he not only speaks in Parliament, he brought in legislation. Okay? Hon Justice Ndungu is called of the Supreme Court.
Njoki Ndung'u.
Njoki Ndung'u. Sexual Offences Act. Let us now go around the country. We used to have Martin Shikuku, may God rest his soul in eternal peace. We used to have George Anyona. We used to have Mashengo Machofi, Dr. Sivule Wasuma. Popular against Moi's money machinery. People say we want this one. Don't go to Parliament, sleep there, and you are only known between tea and the toilet. Then you come out and say you have CDF to tell people you are giving things. You have to legislate and point the country to a specific direction. This looting is both in court and in Jubilee. There's everything wrong with it, and we have to say no and stop it.
All right.
You also, you are my brother, and I know you can be a president. But after me, but make sure that you stop this looting.
Gentlemen, we're out of time. Noah Kala, your closing comments. We have a lot that we've talked about. We've talked about corruption and also talked about the health sector. Maybe your closing comments.
My closing
Very
comments
briefly.
are regarding two things. I'll be very quick about them. The first was this peace initiative that was launched by the
KEPSA.
Kenya Private Sector Alliance over the weekend. I just want to put it out there that they sent an invitation to the opposition to participate in this, and we declined to honor this invitation for the following reason, that KEPSA seems more concerned about painting over the real issues that lead to conflict in Kenya than actually addressing those issues. The reason we say that is because they have put forward no agenda regarding having a credible election in 2017, even in this environment where everybody has said that the IEBC must go. The only time we see their head is when we're a few months to elections and their business interests they feel are endangered.
Although they had given you an opportunity through the invitation to have Raila, Wetangula, and Kalonzo also address, wouldn't that be an opportunity
that does
to...
not count as meaningful participation. Keep in mind that we have hosted the Kenya Private Sector Alliance in Capitol Hill on multiple occasions. We have written to them requesting their intervention on the issue of corruption in Kenya, asking them to come out and say something that they failed to do. We have asked them to challenge the president to act on corruption, something that they failed to do. We challenged them to take a position on the IEBC when Kenyans were clamoring for change, something that they failed to do. And then now they come and tell us that they want to work on this peace initiative. Peace is the byproduct of a credible electoral process.
Okay.
We cannot wish that away. And the second issue that I want to address
Very quickly,
is
we're out of time.
the wind of change blowing across the country. I'm sure you saw the Right Honorable Raila Odinga in Kericho yesterday. Those images, I'm sure, are sending shivers down the spine of my two colleagues.
Because of numbers?
Because of numbers.
Although we
The
do
people-
know over time that the fact that you have a big rally does not necessarily translate to votes.
For a long time, the deputy president has been referring to our coalition leader as a mganga, mtu wa vitendawili, and other very derogatory terms. Well, the people of Kericho showed yesterday that they are interested in those kitendawili, because those kitendawili have served their interests in the past, because tea prices in Kericho are 28 shillings per kilo, while in Kiambu, they are 36 shillings per kilo. Maize prices are lower than they were during the tenure of the Grand Coalition government. Fertilizer prices are higher for farmers now than they were during the tenure of the Grand Coalition government.
No,
So
we'll have to wind up. We'll have to
seems
close
that
right there.
William Ruto had more influence as Minister of Agriculture in Raila Odinga's government than as Deputy President in Uhuru Kenyatta's
Irungu
government.
Kangata, 2 seconds, closing comments.
First and foremost, I want to reiterate that under the old law, that was repealed last year of CDF, members of parliament were ex-officio members, members of that committee. Under the new law, they don't even sit in that committee at all. Number two, as CORD tries to belittle the CDF, the CORD leader, Raila Odinga, should demonstrate to us what he did with the CDF for those 10 or 15 years. He was a substantive.
Should do
I think we'll have to...
Just allow, on a positive note, let me take this opportunity to congratulate the Ministry of Education team.
Yes.
Led by Matiang'i and the rest. We see